I have a part two to the relationship video I made the other day and why relationships fail. And it's a lack of love and a lack of knowledge. Um, People start out with all these happy feelings and then they start turning on each other. People start hating each other, building resentments, getting annoyed with each other, getting bored with each other. And what was once seemed like love has left. And then what happens is people do control or protect. So control is about changing the other person, manipulating the other person, trying to get the other person to change, because if I can change you to be the way I want, then I'll be happy. And the reason I'm unhappy is because you're doing these things wrong and you're not doing these things. So if you would just behave the way I want you to, uh, then I'll be happy. So those are all versions of control. You should read this book, and why don't you do this? And you should do this, and I want this from you, and I'm not getting this from you. Those are all control tactics. And then protect is shutting down, like, well, fuck you, I don't want anything to do with you. It can also be turning away from the relationship, like overusing substances, shopping, going on social media. Like, I'm going to protect myself from you, so I'm just going to turn away. Um, or turning down our feelings. So I think there's just a lack of love and, you know, a lack of caring for the other person. And it's hard sometimes to care for people who annoy us, who aren't the way we want them to be and who seem like they're the cause of our pain. And sometimes they are because we're in the wrong relationship. Sometimes we are because we're not speaking up for what our needs are, or we're in the wrong relationship. And then being in the wrong relationship, people think that they're good for sticking it out, but at great cost. Sometimes you stick it out for the sake of the kids, but at great cost to our own self, because being in a relationship that causes pain, and I'm not even saying that it's the other person's fault. It could be my fault. It could be his fault, her fault. Being in a relationship that causes pain is very dysregulating to the physiology and to the heart. You know, people end up having to find coping mechanisms to deal with their unhappy relationship, because our attachment system is part of our survival instinct, and an attachment system that causes pain is really unhealthy for the physiology. It causes people to close down their heart, go into control or protect, as defense mechanisms, and turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, where they check out of the relationship and they're just unhappy. They just feel constantly triggered or angry or resentful, walking on eggshells in their own home, and having to abandon huge parts of themselves. And that's another thing. I think often people get into relationships in the beginning knowing they have to abandon huge parts of themselves. And that's a decision I made. I'm going to own it. I got into a relationship where I had to abandon my sexuality, my interest in personal development. And I knew that going in. But, there were other positive aspects to it, like my family life, which I really liked. But I had to leave huge parts of myself behind. And he probably had to leave huge parts of himself behind that I didn't appreciate, some of his interests and passions that I didn't nurture. And so I wasn't the ideal partner for him, and he wasn't the ideal partner for me. But I'm just saying, it's so hard for people to get into these happy relationships that are long lasting, because sometimes you get into a relationship, but you have to leave parts of yourself behind. Maybe it's the part of you that likes to dream, or that's the artist, or your sexuality, your interest in meditation, or in investing. Maybe you're a person who is very interested in investing and you're married to someone who's just a spendthrift and is constantly going into debt. Maybe you're very much into being a parent and you're with someone who doesn't want kids. Maybe you really value family, but you're married to someone who has no relationship with family, doesn't want anything to do with your family. Like, what parts of or you're religious and you're married to someone who doesn't want religion at all. And sometimes it's like, what parts of myself do I have to abandon and neglect at a great cost to myself to be in this relationship? I don't know if people ever ask themselves these questions. And then when we have to abandon huge parts of ourselves, of who we are, to fit into this relationship, at what cost? You know, they say that people who are married are actually happier and live longer and have better health outcomes. But I don't know where that comes from, because I'm much happier on my own. I'm much happier on my own. So I'm kind of puzzling about that. Why do you think they say that people who are married live longer, have better health outcomes, or describe themselves as happier? Even though we know that people who have kids describe themselves as less happy because kids add a lot of stress. But I'm just wondering, I'm curious about your comments on the percentage of people are actually happy in their relationships. And we know money makes no difference at all. Just look at the celebrities and the famous people who suffer in their relationships too. There is no out for the rich and the famous or for the celebrities. Women don't have it any better than men. Men don't have it any better than women. It's just, I think our inability to care about each other. And that's how people who were once in love end up ending each other, annihilating each other, jealous rage. Oh, you cheated on me? Well, and out comes the gun, that's not love anymore. And I know that there were times in my marriage I so hated my husband. I was so wanted to be divorced from him, but I didn't take that step. And I kept thinking, what is wrong with me? I'm such a terrible person to hate this man who's the father of my children, who I'm married and I'm supposed to love, but I just hate him. And I just hate him. I'm so annoyed with him. The way he was dressing, and the way he was walking around so angry all the time because he was unhappy with his life. And then, just neglecting me romantically, and I probably neglected him too. He was mad at me too. I let him down in many things that he wanted out of a wife. We never did really talk openly, like how much we resented those things. We didn't talk about it. That was another problem. Like, just don't talk about these things and maybe they'll go away, and they don't go away. But I thought, I'm just a bad person. Am I just such a bad person, or did I marry the wrong guy? But I know that wherever I go, there I am. So I didn't want to blame him for it. But I will say at the time, I did go to 2 different therapists to try to get answers to my internal pain about this relationship towards the end when I was trying to make it work. Like, I tried, and neither one of these people had any advice for me. One of them was like, I can see why you're upset. And the other one was like, well, I don't know what to do, but do you want some Xanax? So, and then I was... I also had a friend who was like a sponsor in a 12-step program, and I used to talk to her a lot. She was easy to talk to, but she didn't know what to do either, because she had the same problems in her relationship, where she was always meeting men who let her down. And so I tried, but I didn't have the right information. I didn't know. So I think we have to be easy on ourselves, but now this was 10 years ago, before I was like watching YouTube videos and I knew about, expressing our needs and being authentic, and we have to speak up, and it's okay to leave a relationship. All these things I didn't know. So I'm just very disillusioned on relationships. I think that a lot of them require, compromise, which I thought was good. Maybe compromise is not so good when it requires, cutting off a huge part of ourselves. But again, it's so complicated. So I think that it's a lack of love, that has us turn on our partners if they don't give us what we want, an anger or resentment. People who get into relationships never loving the other person to begin with, but just seeing, loving what they can get from them, like the women who are the gold diggers, or the men who are the controlling ones. And women can be controlling. This is men and women both. Not entering a relationship from a full heart and wanting to love someone. I think the only way people that can have a chance at a healthy relationship is people who have a full heart and are entering in a relationship in order to share that love with someone else. And that's pretty tough. Um, you have to be willing to receive, you have to be willing to give, and you have to be easygoing. Like, I don't know if I'm cut out for any of this stuff, honestly. Um, but, I like men and I like sex, so that's like, and I don't hook up, so I'm kind of like stuck, in this whole relationship thing, because it just seemed like so many greatest moments I've had with men, frankly, were in the bedroom, because I'm a very sensual, passionate woman. But I've also had a lot of very disappointing moments with men in the bedroom and because of the bedroom. So I think that has been so puzzling. Like, I love sex with men who are very passionate with me, but then if I never hear from them again, it's a great wound. So I don't even do it, but I miss it. So I'm like, I could get that in a relationship, but relationships have so many downsides. Check out my video from yesterday. But I want to know what you think. What do you think about relationships? Oh, and by the way, there are so many people that get into relationships that don't have any desire for sex. Like, for me, sex would be the reason to get into a relationship, to have sex. Someone to have good sex with would be so important. That would be at the top of my list. But for some people, it's at the bottom of their list. They have no interest in sex. So that's very interesting too. Like, I could never date someone who wasn't interested in sex and didn't desire me. I could never do that, but some people can. Um, yeah. At the time when I was married, I would have told you I was happily married. I would have told you I liked being married. But if you would have asked me if I was happy, I would always thought, am I happy? I'm like, no, I can't say that I'm happy. But I can say I'm happy now. I can say that I'm happy now, but not completely, because I'm still yearning for this great sexual man, relationship with this great sexual man. And I want him to be younger. I'm thinking, like, I love guys in their 20s and 30s still. I really do. And I know some of them like older women. So, that's just like a little fantasy I have. So I'm allowed to dream, right? But would I ever get into a relationship? Probably not. I don't see it in my cards, but I can still dream. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that people can actually like thrive in relationships long term? Or is it just a myth that we're sold?